Welcome to another episode of Front Row. Today we have with us Mr. Takafumi Kadono, Country Director ADB Sri Lanka. Taka, welcome to Front Row.
Thank you, Bingu.
So we have about 2 to 3 questions. Let me start with the most important one. Sri Lanka's fiscal policy, fiscal stability had been a key focus for years. Now we're going through a suspension. Now we've done a lot of reforms. So how do we balance this fiscal policy and the growth, especially post economic crisis?
Yeah, thanks for that, Bingu. So I guess I should first commend the progress made by the government to stabilize the economic situation and implement difficult reforms, which I understand goes well beyond International Monetary Fund's requirements. And while the immediate priority is to ensure continued macroeconomic stabilization, address public financial management and fiscal weaknesses, and of course improve domestic resource mobilization, Sri Lanka should not lose sight of the structural reform agenda. So this will be critical to laying the foundation for growth. Also important are eliminating corruption vulnerability, strengthening governance, and also addressing climate vulnerability as well. So I guess it is no easy feat to maintain expenditure while fostering growth in the current environment, but the 2024 budget signaled the government's intent of continuing on this reform path, and it is encouraging to also see that the government is addressing the revenue shortfalls by measures like widening the tax net and trying to minimize the further tax burden on the citizens. On the other side of the coin, in terms of expenditure, the government is clearly keen on safeguarding the financial sector through allocation for the recapitalization of the domestic banks. And this would, of course, ensure that banks are stable, thereby supporting the growth momentum. What we've noticed here are key policy changes in the budget, and these are primarily centered around improving trade, investment, integration into the global value chain, focus on tourism, education, regional development, which is also aimed at creating sustainable growth path. So the government is also undertaking SOE reforms, which we believe is a demonstration of the government to give more space to the private sector to invest in many of the industries and to create this level playing field. I guess there has been a lot of progress made in the past 12 months, but I think there should be a recognition that this is just the beginning of a long journey, and probably beyond the 4 years of the IMF program. So I believe it is important to maintain that momentum with limited political interference, and in doing so, ensure that the reason for these reforms are communicated well with the population so that they understand why these reforms are needed and how they would benefit from them at the end.
Understand, Taka. Very, very interesting. It's long-term and sustainable, and I believe we have to stay on course. So Sri Lanka's debt as a whole had been a major concern, and external debt is a larger concern because you're dealing with external creditors. How would Sri Lanka manage its external debts, balancing with the fiscal stability, and how do we attract FDIs and reduce the dependency on the external debts?
Okay, yeah, that's a very important question. So, Bingu, as you know, I've only been here 4.5 months, but I have heard His Excellency the President and many other people say that Sri Lanka has been living beyond its means, and that has led to, of course, this mounting debt situation that the country is in now. So, of course, simply put, the country needs to move towards non-debt inflows to ensure, gradual ease of dependence on external financing. And to do that, of course, the solution is to strengthen domestic resource mobilization, but you need a strong tax base as well. And that's where, as you said, the foreign direct investment and other types of investment becomes very important. But how do you do that? You cannot just wish for the private sector to come in and invest, of course, right? So there needs to be a conducive environment for them to come with confidence and invest in the long term. And just some figures, I mean, the country has a very weak track record of attracting FDIs. It's been probably less than 2% of the GDP. I understand it was like 1.3% of the GDP prior to COVID, and in the recent years, it's even less than 1% of GDP. And this is much lower than what you would find in low-income countries or middle-income countries globally, and even in the context of South Asia. So Sri Lanka is really lagging behind. One number I have is that Vietnam, for example, had 4.4% of GDP FDI, even during the COVID pandemic. So, this is a reference point and something Sri Lanka can aspire to. So it is encouraging now that the government is focusing on integration with the global value chain and strengthening trade and competitiveness. I think His Excellency the President emphasized that a lot, that Sri Lanka needs to be competitive. He also emphasized the need to be integrated to the global value chain through free trade agreements, and he also mentioned the RCEP as well. So that is very encouraging, and we believe Sri Lanka has the potential to leverage its geostrategic location as well. And for investors to come in, again, they need to have confidence, and for that confidence, there needs to be certainty in the policies. Yeah. So that is of paramount importance to the investors, as you know, as a banker. So it's not only the macroeconomic stability, but also the predictable, transparent, consistent policy environment and business climate that is really needed in Sri Lanka. So creating this enabling environment for long-term investment starts not only in restoring macroeconomic stability, I mean, that is needed, it's a necessity, but ensuring that there's the right legal regulatory frameworks and proper governance at play. So in addition, addressing other bottlenecks in Sri Lanka, such as land, labor, capital market, are important, as well as strengthening the human capital as well, in order to attract investment and have efficient and strong growth. And of course, recently we do see a brain drain, which I'm not sure how we can reverse this, but we need to take that into consideration as a reality as the government strategizes on its growth strategy.
Thank you. The last one is on the the income inequality and the social welfare. While we manage fiscal stability, how do we ensure that income inequality and social welfare concerns are addressed? What policies can be implemented to ensure that inclusive and equitable economic recovery?
So, well, some data show that due to the economic crisis, on the heels of the COVID-19 pandemic, the poverty rate has actually doubled in Sri Lanka from around 11% to 25%. And this is significant. Another data point is that perhaps around 2.8 million people were pushed into or pushed back into poverty recently. So it is a serious concern. And of course, the poor and the vulnerable have less coping mechanisms against such shocks, as well as, unfortunately, perhaps being disproportionately affected by these reforms as well, higher taxes or higher utility bills. So it is very necessary that there is a robust, fair, transparent, and targeted social protection system. So to this end, we are very happy to see the new Aswesuma program being launched. Of course, I think there are still teething pains, but I understand that these are being addressed. So we are not in that space at the moment, but if there is a need, we would be coming in. And we were heartened to see in the 2024 budget that the government has increased provisions or allocations for the Aswesuma by threefold. So I think this is a strong demonstration of the government that they do care about the poor and the vulnerable. And this is extremely important in order to maintain social acceptance on the difficult, deep-seated reforms that are being undertaken. I guess, again, what we need to emphasize in these social protection programs is that they are well-targeted, they're efficiently implemented, and effectively monitored to avoid leakages so that the benefits can be maximized. So the other thing is similar to social protection, but just general policies that are intended to protect and benefit the poor and the vulnerable populations, such as through ensuring food security, improving access to critical services such as healthcare, and supporting the micro, small, medium enterprises, which is something that we will be working on through our upcoming program that supports small and medium enterprises. And of course, when implementing these reforms, again, I want to emphasize again that it is important to maintain that transparency, mainstreaming governance, and ensuring environmental sustainability as well. These are all critical for the reforms to deliver on the intended outcomes and contribute to an inclusive economic recovery and long-term resilience of the society and the economy.
Thanks, Doug. I think you mentioned targeted social welfare and transparency. I think those are key takeaways for the policymakers in Sri Lanka. I also want to thank ADB for being there during difficult times. ADB Sri Lanka partnership is a very old partnership, and we are here for the long run, and thank you for being there during difficult times. So with that, we are coming to an end of this episode, and stay tuned for the next episode on Front Row.